Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And we wanted to engage with a certain facet of gaming, or a certain location, I guess, with the Nintendo Switch being a system that neither one of us can stop talking about. It has opened up an interesting conversation about home consoles versus portability. And portable gaming has had a very long and storied history and a lot of interesting ups and downs and anomalies. And I certainly have a long history of portable gaming. And Matt, I think you do as well.
Yes.
And I think it'd be fun to talk about because something like the Switch, you can choose.
Yeah, you can. The power does not change, and the quality of gameplay does not change between disconnecting it to play it portably or connecting it to the dock and playing on the TV.
I think the only thing is the resolution changes. That's it.
Yeah, but like for the games I've been playing, the resolution change is barely noticeable.
Fair enough.
Like minorly. I mean, also then again, I'm playing a lot of, remakes and indie games, but still, like, it's been barely noticeable to me. But yeah, no, over this past weekend while I was away in Long Beach, I had a conversation with a friend who's primarily a PC gamer, and he owns a Switch. And when I mentioned about how I love the Switch because it's portable, he went, "Oh, that doesn't really matter to me. I play it only at home." And I was my mouth was agape because, like, to me, the Switch is this, destiny of gaming as far as combining portable gaming with home console in a way that we had always dreamed of and we thought the Wii U would be. But what's interesting is it makes sense because then he told me he doesn't really commute. He works from home now. He never really commuted as a kid for long distances, short bus rides, short car rides. And so that makes sense considering the majority of when I would play any of my portable systems was probably while traveling either on family trips or going on vacation or going to school or going to work or whatever. So it made more sense the more I thought about it, but then it got me thinking about the kind of history of portable gaming and how, for a long time, consoles weren't necessarily a thing. With the Game & Watch era and the Tiger Electronics era, those were like you buy a game that's a portable game. It wasn't cartridges or changeable games. It was this one thing is a game, and you can take it with you and play it as much as you want.
Right. And I mean, that's where I guess that's sort of where the inspiration struck in the first place. Gunpei Yokoi first made the Game & Watch, or developed it after seeing a businessman on the commuter train just kind of fiddling with his calculator just for want of something to do. And as a kid, I mean, we've talked about this in the past, that idea of when you don't have disposable income or you rely on birthdays and Christmases or gift-giving holidays, that is, to get your games, you only have a few at a time. But actually, I remember having a good deal of Tiger Electronic games. Did you have any of those?
Yeah, I did. I specifically remember having a Sonic the Hedgehog game where the illusion of running was created by the stage moving beside you or behind you, and you would just make Sonic jump up and down. He doesn't really move forward or back. I think I had a Mario Brothers one that was similar. That I'm pretty sure they made a Donkey Kong one. They also did a lot of popular franchises like cartoons and stuff. Like I'm sure there was a DuckTales one. I imagine there was a Darkwing Duck one and stuff like that. And I always remember them being just enough fun that I didn't hate it, but just cheesy enough that it wasn't great either.
I remember having 3 of them in particular. I remember having Mega Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
Or it might have been Mega Man, but the art on it was distinctly Mega Man 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember I had one and my brother had one. They were the talking Tiger Electronic handhelds. Mine was the X-Men, and his was Beavis and Butthead. And I never beat the Mega Man 2, but I definitely beat both of the talking ones. And I think we had 1 or 2 others, but those are the ones I remember. Although I gotta ask, the Sonic one that you had, was that a Tiger?
I'm pretty sure it was Tiger Electronics, yeah.
Okay, because I remember there being a series of Tiger-like handheld games that were Sega licensed, Sega produced.
Oh.
And
it could have been that then. I honestly don't recall.
but they weren't shaped like the Tiger
Oh,
handhelds.
then
They
maybe it was Tiger. Yeah, I don't really remember, to be honest. I just remember having Sonic. But you're right, it could have been the other one too.
Well, I had one of those, and it was like a Sonic. It wasn't Sonic Spinball, but it was something.
Right.
And like listeners, anybody, if you remember what this particular kind of Sega handheld was, they were gray, like that dark gray,
Mm-hmm.
and they all were different shapes. I think there was an Echo the Dolphin one. There was definitely a Sonic one. Like one of them would like popped out like it was a sliding cell phone. One flipped open. They all had like different mechanisms to them, and they were smaller than Tiger. And there wasn't the Pico because that was a Sega computer, but it was something. And I don't know. It's one of those pieces of childhood where I'm like, I can't remember.
Yeah.
But I do, but I can't.
Well, it's funny with the handhelds, like beyond those one-off Tiger Electronics and the Game & Watch stuff. The first generation, of course, were the Game Boy and the Game Gear, and I had them both. I got the Game Gear first because, like, when I was old enough to realize I wanted these things, choosing color versus black and white, my brain was like, oh, color, that makes sense. Even though the Game Boy had like triple the battery life of the Game Gear because, it didn't have color. I ended up also getting the Game Boy afterwards, late in its life cycle. I remember because I got the Game Boy with a copy of Kirby's Dream Land, which was a later released title. It wasn't one of the earlier
Dreamland
titles.
2?
No, the first one, which was not late in the Game Boy's life cycle, but definitely wasn't in the beginning either. It was somewhere in the middle. The Game Boy had been out for a little while at that point.
Mine was definitely a late, yeah.
And then from there, of course, I pretty much had every Game Boy after that. The Game Boy Color, the Game Boy Pocket, and I didn't get many of the Game Gear systems. I remember when I was at my summer camp, when I was in grade school, someone I knew had the Sega Nomad, and so I'd bring my Sega Genesis cartridges from home to play it. And that was like the closest thing as a kid I remember getting to having a Nintendo Switch, essentially this giant, bulky, portable system that was able to play the same cartridges you played at home on a TV, which I thought was phenomenal, even though that I'm sure too, the resolution was not probably great.
Yeah, and to be fair, there's a lot of moments in the timeline of handheld systems where it was, well, that was a good idea, but we weren't ready for it technologically.
Yeah, like the Virtual Boy.
Like the Virtual Boy, like the Nomad, like the UMD discs for the Sony PSP.
Oh, yes.
Think of how many people watch movies, watch TV shows on their phone, on their tablets, on handheld devices, on commuter trains and buses nowadays.
Yeah, that's
but
true.
But having them as individual discs in cartridge, I mean, the UMD format was also not doomed, but was a flawed argument.
Yeah. It's tough when you create a new a new hardware and a new kind of cartridge, like, going from, the Super Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, the N64, it's all new technology and you couldn't play them together. But then going from like the Wii to the Wii U, you could play Wii games on the Wii U, similar things with the generations of the PlayStation and the Xbox. And so, yeah, but also, yeah, I think what really killed the UMD market is asking people to buy two versions of a movie. They had to buy it on a DVD and on the UMD because one didn't work with the other. Now, in the current digital age, I feel like UMDs would work fine because people would just buy them on the UMD, get a digital download code, and put it on their phone and their PSP. But that didn't quite exist yet.
Yeah, if it came with a digital download, it would work. Like something like the PSP Go would do movies fine. But also the UMD was Sony taking that idea where they adopted the CD-ROM format and dominated the 32-bit era market. And, there's that whole idea of like, okay, yeah, there's loading times, but look at how all the audio fidelity, the storage, the FMVs compared to N64, and it's so much cheaper. But shrinking down a CD and putting it in a cartridge like completely does away with most of those advantages.
Yeah.
So you're just left with a proprietary piece of hardware that no one has bought into, and you're asking everybody to buy into completely. A mistake that they made again with their memory cards for the PS Vita.
Yeah.
Which I'm still salty about. I have gigs and gigs of storage for it because I need it, but I'm not happy about it.
Yeah, probably the smartest thing Nintendo ever did with the 3DS and the Switch is allowing it to use regular storage, SD and micro SD.
They're already making money on the games and the hardware. They don't need to make extra money on the storage.
I mean, but remember, that's also of an age. I mean, the PlayStation 1 and 2 and the Xbox, had sort of a memory card system with the hard drive. But like the PS1 and 2, like those relied on memory cards. You couldn't do anything. Same with the GameCube.
But they were a lot cheaper, and there was much more storage to it.
That's also true. That's also definitely true.
And to be fair, as a retro collector now, I have so much fun buying old PS1, PS2 memory cards.
Right.
Because there's so many different colors, so many different kinds. And then I plug them in, and I see what people saved.
Right.
I get these weird little looks into people's windows. It's so much fun.
But going back to portable gaming, I think the company that really, and it's not a secret to anyone, that really kind of paved the way for this market was Nintendo. Because starting with the Game Boy and then from the Game Boy Pocket to the Game Boy Color, they allowed crossover and continuation of previous cartridges. It was all the same cartridge for all of these systems until we got to the Nintendo DS. Oh no, the Game Boy Advance. I'm sorry. It was the Game Boy Advance, but even that, the original Game Boy Advances could still play the old Game Boy cartridges as well as the new Game Boy Advance cartridges.
The Game Boy Micro was the first one that couldn't play all the way back.
Right. And so they knew their market and they knew this crossover and being able to play these games on all these systems, even with newer stuff, made for great crossover. And then when we moved on to the DS and the DSi, that had the DS, not the DSi. The DS had a Game Boy Advance slot, so you could still play the Game Boy Advance games, but not the regular Game Boy games on the DS. And then eventually when we moved to the DSi, it became just the DS cartridges. But then when we moved to the 3DS, you could still play the DS cartridges on the 3DS. And so there's always been this connection of crossover until we got to the Switch, where there was a rumor that there was going to be a 3DS cartridge slot on the Switch, but there isn't. But I thought it's interesting that for most of their longevity with portable systems, there's always some semblance of crossover between previous technology and current technology.
Yeah, Nintendo's always been willing, both in consoles but very much in handhelds, to be slightly behind in technology so that they can have a longer and better gaming experience. I mean, anybody who's had a Game Gear, you and I included, Matt,
Yes.
Remember how abysmal the battery life is.
Yeah.
And the Game Gear was my handheld of choice for a lot of my younger years. I would spend a lot of time driving back and forth to Vermont from New Jersey. My mother's family lives up in Vermont, and Christmases would be there and vacations and times. We'd go up a few times a year, and that is at least a 4-hour drive. And I had a battery pack for the back of it. If you want to look it up, it's called the Power Back. It makes the thing even more monstrous. The way I compare it to people is think of the VHS version of Titanic. Hold it in your hands. You're playing my Game Gear. But it meant I could play Sonic, Shinobi, Samurai Showdown, Mortal Kombat, all of my favorites. Even when they were very late night drives, I would be sitting in the back seat and I'd have that bright fluorescent light screen. It uses a fluorescent tube for its backlighting. Why?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not there to make these decisions, but oh my God, no wonder the thing chomped up batteries. But because of that, you couldn't have a long gameplay session unless you took precautions. Whereas the Game Boy, it was 4 AA's and it lasted most of the day. The Game Boy Color is still one of my favorite handhelds to take with me to this day on the subway because it takes 2 AA's, and if I'm just playing it to and from work or to and from appointments, it lasts me over a week before I need to change it. And that is a consideration that needs to be made with portable gaming that you don't need to make with home consoles. The length of your experience as well as stop and start, which is something Nintendo got the hang of pretty quickly. But you see something like the Sony PSP, which tried to shrink console gaming to the handheld with no consideration for stopping and starting, or quick breaks. Where older Game Boy games had to be quick affairs. You can beat Super Mario Land, you can beat Kirby's Adventure in a single subway ride or a single bus ride. You can make your way through a lot of the earlier Game Boy games in a single sitting. That's the idea. And then as they got battery saving, they would save frequently. So if you had to turn it off, you wouldn't lose much progress.
Yeah, that's something we talked about recently with my not wanting to play as many deep RPGs on the Switch, is because I need the on and off gameplay style of a Crash Bandicoot, so I can just turn it off when I get to work.
But one of the fun things that I really enjoy about the more recent generation, I suppose, certainly Nintendo, but also other systems as well, because they've taken on the smartphone idea, is sleep mode.
Yeah.
You can close the lid on it, anything from a DS onward for Nintendo, and it automatically just goes to sleep. It doesn't have a deep interface like a Sony system or your phone or tablet. It just saves right where you are. You open it back up, off you go.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned the games also earlier, talking about Shinobi and the other games, Mortal Kombat for the Game Gear, and it got me thinking something that we're not going to experience anymore, because the Switch, it's the same game handheld or on console, but something that up until very recently with the 3DS, we still continued to get something which is called the handheld version. The idea that the games that were coming out needed two versions, whatever the main properties console was version, and then a portable kind of dumbed down, so to speak, to be really layman, version for the handhelds.
It was dumbed down one way or the other.
So we saw it all the time, where Sonic the Hedgehog 2 on Sega Genesis was this elaborate story, bright colors, great music. The Sonic the Hedgehog 2 for the Game Gear, which was also the Master System version, was this more kind of dumbed down. You couldn't play as Tails. Tails was kidnapped. It was a different story, different graphics. And this idea that they were almost redesigned for these separate systems. Now, as the graphical fidelity got better, stuff that was going on the 3DS and the Wii were much more similar, like the Lego games. They didn't have a huge leap in difference between them, other than maybe some gimmicks here and there. But like the idea that the Switch and the Vita, to a certain extent, kind of have these console builds that you don't really need to do that anymore. And I always thought it was really interesting the variety of ways console companies would make dumbed down versions for their handhelds and see how it worked. Like, look at the Mario titles. Super Mario Land 1 and 2 are unlike anything on the Nintendo or Super Nintendo, and they are great games in their own right. Super Mario Land 2 is still one of my favorite Mario games. I went back and played it recently on the 3DS, and it still holds up. Like, it's still a great game.
It really does. And the allowance to sort of develop within the handhelds. The first Super Mario Land was not handled by Shigeru Miyamoto and his team. It was handled by R&D1, Gunpei Yokoi's team. So a lot of the design differences came from an entirely different group of people, where there was only a few Mario releases at that point, and they went, well, what are we going to do on the Game Boy? Well, this. And you got a wildly different, and I think very fun experience. And some of that carried over, and they held on to that as they made a more usual Mario kind of game with Mario Land 2. And they'd already introduced Wario in that, who had not been in any of the console games. It was its own existence. And then they went, all right, well, the new Super Mario Land for the new Super Mario Land 3 is going to be Wario Land. And then that started an entirely new franchise. And it gave a character a platform who has been a mainstay of Nintendo for a long time. That started on the handheld. Also, going back a second, fun fact, Tails in Sonic the Hedgehog, his first appearance was the Master System Game Gear version of Sonic the Hedgehog 2.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually predates the Genesis version.
It does, so it's kind of funny. The Genesis version, that was the first one he got to play as him. Before that, he was a damsel. Which is its own silly thing.
Yes. But I always thought that was fascinating. And like, you know, in the Game Gear years and the Game Boy years, like in the Game Boy years, there was this better understanding that it was going to be two separate games. There was not necessarily always this like idea that it was ported. But with Game Gear, a lot of the games, they tried to do direct ports like Mortal Kombat, which more or less they tried to feed to you unchanged, even though obviously it was.
It was a very much dumbed down thing. I remember trying one of the first two games. The two games that I got with my Game Gear were Sonic the Hedgehog 2 and Mortal Kombat 2. I did not find any fatalities in that game, like how to do any of them, that I did not figure out myself before, I don't know, 4 years ago? A handful of years ago, where I went, the hell with this, I'm going to look them up. So now that I have it again, I've tried them out and they all work, but when Nintendo Power and other game magazines, GamePro, or any of those came out with tips and tricks for Mortal Kombat 2, it was the SNES and the Genesis version.
Yeah.
No consideration for the Game Boy, and definitely no consideration for the Game Gear. It was a hell of an underdog system, and yeah, they would get some interesting, I don't want to say demakes, but there were a lot of, I've never really played as Baraka before, because he wasn't in the Game Gear version. And most of my time with Mortal Kombat 2, way more of it, has been on the Game Gear. So I've never really played Baraka or Kung Lao, or there's a couple of them. There was only 8 on the Game Gear version.
Right, of course. And what's interesting about that, like coming back to modern times now, with the recent news on Smash Brothers, as of the week we're recording, they announced a ton of new characters for Smash Brothers Ultimate, which is coming to the Switch. But what was interesting is I didn't own the Wii U version of the last Smash Brothers. I only owned the 3DS. But when I did get to play the Wii U version, what was really impressive was there was very little difference. The Wii U version had some more game modes, but as far as character movesets and graphical fidelity, it was minimal difference as far as what felt left out. And I never felt like I got a lesser version of the game. That was the true testament to Nintendo's through line of consistency, especially with Smash Brothers, and that was really exciting. Now, ultimately, I didn't play the 3DS version as much as I would the console version because it's harder to play multiplayer on the portable version, but it was still interesting to see that we were kind of coming out of that demake scenario. Now, to be fair, again, there are plenty of 3DS games that I never played that probably weren't demakes, but for the most part, I bought exclusives to the 3DS, with the exception of stuff, like the Chrono Trigger re-release on DS and other things that were clearly just ports. And so I don't have a wealth of knowledge on demakes on the later generations of handhelds, but it was nice to see with with Smash Brothers that they worked really hard to keep those two versions as similar as possible.
We're entering actually into a very interesting segment of Nintendo development, because it's easy to forget that when the Nintendo DS first came out, it wasn't the sure thing that history makes it out to be.
Right.
I remember having arguments with people about its viability versus the PSP, which came out at the same time, or roughly around. And even Nintendo was pushing it as a third pillar. There was the GameCube, there was the Game Boy Advance, and there was the Nintendo DS, which offered a different sort of gaming experience. And we're not abandoning the Game Boy brand or the Game Boy hardware. This is just something different. And then when it succeeded, they went, burn it to the ground, DS forever.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, which was the cautious, and honestly, that was the right move to make.
Right.
You don't want to alienate your fans. You then run into the sort of sour grapes that Wii U owners are having now with Switch games, some of them being re-releases of Wii U titles or updates of Wii U titles. But then you also have the 3DS. I was reading some articles recently, people arguing, why are you even releasing new games on the 3DS now? But there have been releases like Captain Toad on both the Switch and the 3DS. With the update of the 3DS hardware for both the new 3DS and the new 2DS, you can get Hyrule Warriors working on that. You've got Donkey Kong Country Returns. You've got a lot of different titles that still work on the 3DS, which is a more affordable piece of hardware than the Switch right now, and is a good deal more durable and easier to put in a 6-year-old's hands.
Yeah.
And they can have those experiences, but there's still an interesting sort of, we're not developing anything for the Wii U anymore. That's not coming out. But there are Wii U properties and titles and ideas that are showing up on 3DS, that are showing up on the Switch. Is it a 3DS title? Is it a Switch title? And the fact that the Switch is both a home console and a portable console blurs those lines even further. So it's a very interesting sort of circular motion as we move forward.
Well, yeah, because you have to think with Nintendo, since none of the other consoles have done something like this yet, that will they continue to make the 3DS in the long run? You know, in the short term, we know that they are still supporting the 3DS and the 2DS and still releasing games for them, if not less frequent. But to me, anyway, my prediction seems like the Switch is the direction, and that going forward, every Nintendo console will be some version of the Switch that's portable and can be played at home. And for me, as a portable gamer, that seems awesome, and I hope that other consoles follow suit. You know, I would love to have a portable version of the PlayStation 4 or the Xbox One that I can then go home and plug in. You know, eventually then it becomes the thing of needing to carry multiple portable systems, and which one do you carry and how many of them do you carry?
I carry several anyway. I don't care.
But it's this idea, it's this interesting turning point. You know, now, of course, Xbox never entered the portable gaming race. Some of their titles have had mobile versions that came out, but for the most part, Xbox is stuck to home console and PC, which works for them. You know, Sony still has the Vita. They're still supporting it. And
Sort of.
Yeah, they're still releasing at least the free titles every month for it. And the PS4, but there's been no news on continued support for the Vita, so I have to wonder, will they do another handheld in the future, especially considering Nintendo, as always, continues to dominate that market. But something we haven't talked about yet, but we've talked about before on this show, the Game Boys and the Game Gears of the past have created the mobile gaming of the present. The fact that every phone can be a game system, and the fact that we discussed in our E3 episode that the next big release for Elder Scrolls by Bethesda, besides Elder Scrolls 6, whatever that'll be, is Elder Scrolls Blades for the phone. And they're taking it in a way that you can, first of all, they want you to play with the phone upright, not sideways. And it's going to incorporate a ton of game mechanics from Skyrim and games that came before it. And so that seems really interesting because it seems like a full-fledged game. And for what I've been told, there have been tons of releases of what I would call real games, whatever the hell that means to you, on the phone, as well as classics. Like I have the original Vector Man for Sega Genesis on my phone to play. And, you know, that's something that I haven't been able to experience portably since the Nomad. And so it's interesting to me, like, I'll never go to a phone first to buy a game. But with games like Elder Scrolls Blades coming out, I'm more intrigued. And I still play a ton of Pokemon Go. Like, if you create a really unique and interesting gaming experience on the phone, that's as viable for portable gaming to me as I feel anything else.
Yeah, and I think the bigger budget or larger franchise that are console-centric or started there, mobile gaming allows them a interesting verisimilitude. There is a Fallout game, Fallout Shelter.
Yes.
That is within the Fallout universe. It is a completely different kind of game. And it reminds me of those old style, you got the console version and the handheld version. The handheld version is never going to be as powerful as the console version. Don't worry about it. Just enjoy the handheld game.
Yeah.
And you get that idea. You do get a lot of indie titles. I, not too long ago, switched from iPhone to Android for a number of reasons. And I have been a longtime supporter of Humble Bundle. And a wonderful discovery for me was the fact that many of the Humble Bundles that I have supported that got me wonderful games for my computer were also Android capable. And I now have Android versions of well over 100 games.
That's really cool.
So I can start playing those on my phone. However, I also just recently downloaded Ascension, which if you haven't played it, it is a card game developed by people who were hardcore Magic the Gathering players. And it is a game where you don't have to buy booster pack after booster pack. It's a deck building game where it retains the feel of Magic the Gathering, which is exactly what I want in my life all the time. I don't want to give Magic the Gathering all of my money, but I would like to play card games still. And it does this magical thing. You can play it offline. That is the big issue I have with mobile phone games. Sarah and I were at Gen Con last weekend, and one of the things we ran into was another deck building game, Legendary, that is releasing a mobile and tablet version. And it's a decent interface, and it's a game we really enjoy. However, it is online only, which makes sense when you have phones because they need to be connected all the time. And I'm sure for a lot of people that play games on their commute, it's fine. But I live in New York City. Most of my commute is in a subway, underground. My reception is spotty. The amount of times I've tried to start a game on my phone, very excited about it, only to get you need to log in before you can play. And then I go, well, fuck this. I delete it. I don't even think about it again. The amount of games I have scorched earth from my phone because I need to be online to do them is a high number. I wish I didn't have that violent of a reaction to it, but it is the one thing that is keeping me from diving headfirst and being mobile gaming is amazing. Mobile phone gaming is fantastic and is the wave of the future and can live side by side with the 3DS and the Switch and the PS Vita, and we can all join hands and sing about it because I need to connect to the fucking server in order to even do anything. We didn't accept this with Diablo 3. Why are we accepting it on our phones?
Yeah, no, that's the hugest challenge, I think, for me as a mobile gamer is the fact that I can't play it literally anywhere. And what I will continue to love about the Switch and everything that came before it is that internet is helpful or even encouraged, but not required.
Yeah. Street Pass. It was totally a thing. If you passed by somebody and you had connection, cool. Do you need it to complete the game? No, it just enriches the experience a little bit.
I do have to say, as a mobile gamer and someone who loves his 3DS and hasn't touched it in a while, I do really want the Nintendo Switch to have some kind of Street Pass feature in the future because I miss getting Street Passes. It was just such a fun thing to do, and considering the system is always in sleep now anyway, the only way to actually turn it off is to hold the power button and select to power off. The default power mode is a sleep mode. I would really love to have Street Passes again. For one, because what I loved about the Street Pass on the 3DS is you could have your me say a little thing, and it could be whatever you wanted, but you could get some real insight to the people you're meeting, and also tracked what states and countries you met people in and where they were from,
It was so fun to take to conventions. Even ones near where you lived, you'd see people from all over the world, all over the country. Okay, let's be honest. Me's are really dumb.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
but I love them.
Yep.
Just because they're dumb doesn't mean there isn't delight within them. These are not exclusive.
Right. Well, yes. I mean, look at the fact that Xbox followed suit with their avatars, which were also cute and whatever, but also dumb. Like this idea that you need these little caricature versions of yourselves, but I still enjoy them. And I think it was fun to have it as a way to meet people without using their real photo because that kind of stuff is creepy.
And as we've spoken about in previous episodes, there is a definite delight, there is an allure of creating your little avatar, having your little flourish touch of whom you are, whether it is in the faceplate you put on your home or portable console, the avatar you choose, even your online handle.
Yeah.
And I am dating myself like a goddamn dinosaur by saying your online handle.
I know, because nobody calls it that anymore. Although it's funny, I will say that having a Nintendo Switch and it being linked to my Facebook and Twitter, the fact that I ended up changing my username to Storm, I believe, from Cyrus666, which was my handle for years and years, because I didn't want people to see that name and go, who the hell is this guy? Because no one on my Facebook is going to recognize that name, whereas all of my old gamer friends will.
Yeah, exactly. And it's interesting to have to slowly unify these things, but again, it creates that online persona and the walls are coming down, I guess. And in the meantime, I have my phone in my pocket and I bring with me, actually right now I have my Vita where I'm playing Odin Sphere, and I've got my old DS because I just recently got a copy of Castlevania Circle of the Moon, which I've never played. I've played Aria of Sorrow over and over again, but I missed the first two GBA Metroidvanias when they came out, and they're among my favorite kinds of games, and this one is challenging, and I'm loving it. And so the thing I most wanted to play it on was the DS, so I've been carrying that with me. So I will. This isn't stopping me. And once summer's over, I'm going to start bringing my Switch with me everywhere. But I'll probably also still have the Vita with me.
Yeah, for me right now, I unfortunately have abandoned my 3DS pretty hard. I still want to go back and buy the new version of Samus Returns on the 3DS and play it, but I haven't hit a lull with my Switch yet. There are so many games I want to play, which is a result of the Switch just being flooded with third-party and indie titles as well as the Nintendo mainstays. It's the first time in a long time I've had a Nintendo system where I'm like, I can't play every single game I've ever wanted to play on this system, which is a good problem to have. But
It's a wonderful problem.
But I'm carrying my Switch these days, of course my phone as well, which I mostly only play Pokemon Go in very small spurts on anymore. I don't really play any other games on it. I mostly use my phone for checking social media. But on my Switch, I'm currently playing Crash Bandicoot Warped, which is the final installment on the Crash Insane trilogy, as well as I just got a copy of Hollow Knight, which I am loving.
Nice.
It's this strange mix of Metroidvania plus Dark Souls. This idea that when your character dies, you lose your currency and you don't get it back unless you get your soul back. But if you die a second time, you lose all of that currency.
It's a fun game.
I'm really digging it so far. I like the lack of story. The fact that the narrative is so ambiguous is actually really interesting.
It's very Metroid style, yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious to see if it'll have longevity for me. Right now, I've not hit a stopping point yet, but I'm afraid, like with Dark Souls, if I get to a really difficult part, I'll eventually give up. But I haven't gotten there yet, which is good. So those are the two games I'm playing there right now.
Yeah, I very nearly gave up on Circle of the Moon when I got to the zombie dragon boss.
Ugh.
And have you played it? Do you remember that?
Yes.
Yeah, I spent all of I reached that boss on the flight out to Gen Con last week. I didn't beat it until the plane ride back. And it was a war of attrition. I needed to use the card combination that healed me periodically. It took me probably 20 solid minutes to beat that boss, but I'm through it, and now I'm beating this game. It's wonderful. And who knows which handheld system I'll carry with me next. Maybe the 3DS, maybe the Game Boy Color. But I don't know. It's just fun to rotate through. They don't take up that much space, and as one loses power, you plug it in when you get home and you play something else in the meantime. That's what I love about it.
Yeah, totally. Now, it's clear that Geoff and I are advocates for handheld gaming. We both like playing handhelds very much. But as I mentioned, shout out to my friend Robert, who listens to the show, who I was talking with over the weekend about him not playing portable stuff. I'm curious, if your experience as a listener is against portable gaming, why? Is it simply because you just have no time to play it? Is it because you prefer a TV or monitor and you don't like the smaller screen? Like, I'm really curious why, because up until the Switch, the screens were really small, and for difficulty reasons of not being able to see it or just not being comfortable or whatever else, I'm curious to hear what your experience is, because for me, portable was always the priority. I'd say that I'm primarily a portable and PC gamer. I like home console as well, but those are the two things that will always take priority in my gaming life. And the fact that the Switch is portable and a home console, I play it more portable than anything else. Sometimes I'll sit on my couch in front of my TV, but reclining on my couch, playing it in handheld mode, just because. There's
It's a wonderful experience.
Right, and I think there's less setup. Like, I have to turn on the TV, I have to plug in the system, take off the Joy-Cons, blah, blah, blah. But without my old man complaining included, I think that, it's really interesting to me that some people may not play games handheld. And a lot of our listeners I know have a Switch, and I do know are handheld gamers. So I'm curious why they are or aren't, and what gets them to try out the gaming in those ways.
Oh, yeah, and there's all sorts of reasons, and some of them are logical, some of them are historical. My Vita was a used Vita that I got off my friend Sean because he realized it had the sort of games he wasn't necessarily interested in playing, and he didn't commute as much as I do, not on public transportation, so he wasn't getting a lot of time out of it. Whereas I've gotten tons of it because of, public transportation. So we're very curious what your reasons are to be pro, con, ambivalent, or anywhere in between. What are some of your favorite classic handheld consoles? Who really holds a torch for the Atari Lynx?
Oh, God.
Or the TurboGrafx one, TurboGrafx Express.
Yeah.
Good luck keeping that thing
Oh,
working.
what was there's Neo Geo Pocket, but there was a phone/video game system.
Well, there was the Gamecom. The N-Gage.
The N-Gage.
Oh my God! If you love the N-Gage, please make me understand why.
Yeah, because I remember selling that damn thing when I worked at GameStop back in the day, and I never understood it. Meanwhile, it predicted everything we have today as far as phone technology goes. So I think it's really fascinating that it never took off. But yeah, let us know all of your feelings on mobile and portable gaming. Like I said, I'm not a mobile gamer, but if you are, tell me why and tell me what you like about it, because I'm really curious to hear all of that stuff. You can always, of course, interact with us on Facebook, and on Twitter is where we primarily check. You can also email us at funandgamespod@gmail.com. Thank you, of course, as always, for listening. Rate us and review us. Hell, if you're a friend of mine and you're listening right now and you're like, oh, this podcast is boring, that's fine. Just subscribe to us anyway and write a review, and then never listen again. Anything to get those sweet rankings. But in all seriousness, please listen, and thank you for listening.
Yes, thank you for keeping this conversation going. We've clearly hit a subject that we will talk about endlessly, and we would love to talk about it endlessly with all of you. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for keeping this conversation going. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt, a.k.a. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.